The Trinidad Chambliss eligibility case, it has a potential decision day.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now it's the number one sports podcast network in America. That is because of fans like you taking in content like this, and we can't be more appreciative of that. On today's show, we're going to break down sort of the latest legal filing from Tom Mars and Trinidad Chambliss. While it doesn't rule out ultimately winning the waiver from the NCAA, which could come at any time, even between the time of me recording this and the time you listening to this. It does provide important protection for both Trinidad and Ole Miss if the NCAA ruling goes sideways. Next, we'll talk about how this situation fits a familiar pattern with the NCAA's history with Ole Miss and whether the Rebels have finally crossed over to the other side of the respect line that would prevent this from getting out of hand. But first, we're going to start with a key development. Trinidad Chambliss submitting additional evidence as a part of his injunction hearing. That move signals Ole Miss is prepared for any NCAA pushback and is ready if the NCAA organization decides to bring the usual shenanigans into play. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So let's talk about this Trinidad situation, the NCAA situation, and dealing with Trinidad, and now because of all of this weird Dabo stuff, kind of Ole Miss floating into the ether. Let's talk about all of that. And I think this is a pretty good indication that Ole Miss is prepared for all of the shenanigans that the NCAA can bring out against Trinidad Chambliss. Period. He is the best quarterback in the country. He would have been the top transfer portal player that was taken. Ole Miss retaining him was an unbelievably major feat, and that should not be set aside because that's all a part of this. Because Trinidad coming back with Kewan, Lacy, and Lucas Carneiro, 3 preseason first team way too early All-Americans by Chris Lowe at On 3. You can see the direction that this Ole Miss football team is prepared to go if they get the waiver that is deserved for Trinidad Chambliss. So when it comes down to it, Trinidad Chambliss is putting in a lawsuit for eligibility. Now, it's not similar to the Diego Pavia thing, but they're taking a similar road to eligibility potentially for Trinidad Chambliss. The hearing will be on February 12th at, I think, 9:30 a.m. Central. And that will be for the, I would say, the temporary and the preliminary injunction. Whatever gets you to the case, that injunction should be decided off of that hearing. And it'll take place in Pittsboro, Mississippi, which is kind of hilarious because it's one of the few places that I've had to look up where exactly that is. And basically, chancery courts in Mississippi, there's about a 5-county district, and inside that district, they can be put in any of those particular courtrooms. And Pittsboro has a chancery court in there. I think they have about 187 people living in that town, but they have a chancery court. And the important thing is that they have a room, they have electricity, and they can get the proceedings off without a hitch, because I don't think that Oxford or the major cities up there have the infrastructure and the time right now to get everybody in. We're hoping Pittsboro can. And it's about 50 minutes from Oxford as driving to Pittsboro. It's about, I think, 15 miles from Bruce, Mississippi, if you're familiar with that geography. So that case will be there. The hearing for the preliminary injunction will happen. Nearly everybody assumes this to go through one way or another. That's one of the reasons that I'm surprised with all of the shenanigans that the NCAA is pulling with eligibility. Now, it isn't like Jarrell Poe, where it took like 2 years to get him eligible, and they kept dragging their feet and saying, oh, we need more information. They're doing the same stuff. This is on a faster timeline, but I think the lawsuit has a role in that to play. So Trinidad Chambliss filed for that. He's likely going to get it on the 12th or 13th or whenever a ruling comes down. And he will be eligible for spring practice and everything will be as normal. And Ole Miss will have the best quarterback in the country on campus. That's the way it's set up right now. The NCAA, if they were, I don't know, legitimate, kind of, you sit here and look at it, they would just approve this in the waiver process instead of losing in a courtroom. This would have already been done. This would have been already over, but they're playing shenanigans. And this is why I think they're playing shenanigans. Now, a lot of people want to tie it to the Clemson Luke Farrelly thing, and I don't know if it's there. But Ole Miss is in that perfect demographic. Okay, when your credit score hits a certain point, all of a sudden you start getting those credit card offers in the mail. They start coming in 2 and 3 a day to try and get there because you're in that honey hole spot to where you would be a perfect candidate to get them because your credit's not good enough to where you're not going to use it, but it's good enough to where you can get a credit card and make the mistakes and kind of maybe get into debt. So they do that. The NCAA looks at Ole Miss the same way. And we're going to talk, it's a very familiar pattern, but anytime Ole Miss gets good, they are a perfect target to where the NCAA can make a statement on a school without really damaging anybody that has the clout of a large fan base. It's the old joke where the NCAA was so mad at Kentucky, they put Cleveland State on 3 years probation, that old basketball joke. There is a little bit of truth in that. You don't see blue bloods getting punished. You see people below the blue bloods getting absolutely hammered to where you can say, hey, we got them good. We got our scalp on the wall. And the question is going to become whether Ole Miss over the last 5 years has gotten to a point where they're kind of crossed that respect line to where they get treated in a much more favorable place. And when you look at a roster with potentially 3 first-team All-Americans on offense, you can see that there's a chance to, A, make an example of Ole Miss over whatever you want to make an example of, but also the Ole Miss has a chance to be really, really good this fall, especially when you look at the way they've reworked their defense and all of that. So this Trinidad waiver, Ole Miss fans probably just need to hope for it to get over because it looks like the injunction's going to go through. Everybody's acting as if Trinidad's going to be the starting quarterback in 2026. So get the injunction through, get him going through spring practice, and then look at the other stuff that the NCAA could pull. Because Ole Miss knows this. Listen, we're still at the point where we're waiting on Ross Bjork to tell his side of the story. He was basically throwing Ole Miss under a bus, and he was going to try and get out as soon as he can because he wasn't attached to Ole Miss. He didn't care if Ole Miss got absolutely hammered. Jeffrey Bitter didn't care if Ole Miss got absolutely hammered. And Hugh Freeze was just sloppy as all get out. But it's a trend. It's a pattern when it comes to Ole Miss football and success. When Ole Miss gets good, the NCAA comes knocking, and it doesn't mean that Ole Miss is out of control. They're doing what everybody else is doing. They're just using it to selectively enforce. And if this Farrelly thing, anything comes from it, man, that is really selective enforcement. Any Ole Miss fan knows this NCAA playbook. It comes out every time the Rebels start competing with the big boys. We're going to talk about that next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot. celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. The WNBA has released its 2026 schedule featuring a 44-game regular season beginning on Friday, May 8th. The league's historic 30th season includes expansion teams Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, with opening weekend highlights such as Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hosting Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings, and a rematch of the 2025 finals between the Aces and the Mercury. And unrivaled, Miami felt the breeze as Paige Beckers powered the breeze to a 75-68 win over the Lunar Owls, finishing with 28 points and 7 assists. She was joined by 20-year-old Dominique Malunga, who added 21 points, 8 rebounds, and became just the second player to ever dunk in an unrivaled game. In college hoops, South Carolina handed Vanderbilt its first loss of the season with a dominant 103-74 win. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it keeps all of this free. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every single day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemist.supercast.com or check out the link down in the show notes for more. All right, so Ole Miss fans are familiar with this pattern. Ole Miss gets good at football. All of a sudden, there's somebody that finds a reason to sick the NCAA on Ole Miss. They can't stand any situation where Ole Miss is good. You saw it with the Hugh Freeze stuff. You saw it with the Clemson stuff and the reaction that is going on in the public sphere right now, which is unbelievably disingenuous and unbelievably performative, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But just history, even in the 90s, that Billy Brewer got saddled with, that Ole Miss was getting good. They went 9-3 and went to a Gator Bowl, and all of a sudden, boom, probation. It is pretty consistent of what's going on, and Ole Miss is not doing anything that everybody else is not doing. And that has people nervous about this, I don't know, situation that's going on. And I don't think that anybody needs to be nervous, because if you look traditionally, it's a level 2 violation. It's a game suspension at most. You're going to be fine. What's going on. But what people are nervous about is about selective enforcement and the NCAA having an opportunity to get a scalp of a Southeastern Conference team without getting one of the big boys. And I had sources really, really close to the situation while this was going on over the last couple of months. And once this Clemson stuff broke, you shoot a text message. And it was like, so what's going on? The answer was the one person or the one team that should be really hoping that nothing comes of this is LSU. Because Dabo wasn't the only one that kept a logbook of what's going on. That exists. Ole Miss likely has more evidence going on because they knew as soon as the coaching change happened to keep their ears up for it. They were expecting a big thing. Lane Kiffin was openly recruiting Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacy while the season was going on before he accepted any job. So the groundwork was being put in place, and how Ole Miss and Walker Jones and the Grove Collective and Pete Golding and all them got out of this with LSU only taking 4 people is a testament to how badly they screwed up that exit. So I guess in that case, we should thank them. But everybody knows that situation. And there's so much disingenuous crap going on right now. They're talking about, hey, Trinidad Chambliss should go into the NFL in this quarterback class. Even though Trinidad has a draft grade, he's seen exactly what was up, and he can make nearly $6 million at Ole Miss. Makes sense for him to come back to college. And they're like, okay. But you've already exhausted your eligibility. You can't get a year back because of a sore throat. They're calling severe tonsillitis as a sore throat and all of this. Basically, the point is nobody will spit facts, whether they're a reporter or anything else, about what's going on. Everything is an opinion put out to help their agenda. And the reason for that is there is no hard evidence in this case. It is all he said, she said. Every bit of it. So when it gets put out that this happened and in a very authoritative voice, people are pre-programmed to just say, oh man, that's it. Because reporters go to press conference now and report on what is said, not what's actually happening. One group can say it's not raining. The other group can say it is raining. No reporter will look out of the window. That is what we're dealing with at this point. So Dabo came out forcefully and said, this is going on, and Ole Miss did it. And they did the stupid thing on their roster, which that was proof that they actually had nothing, is they're just trying to win the PR war. They don't expect anything to come of this. They just want to win the PR war. They can threaten everything, but it will never see the inside of a courtroom because there's no penalties, no damages that can come from it. And the reality of it is, if I'm Pete Golding, I find 2 players on Clemson's roster and start pre-portaling them for next transfer portal cycle right now, just to prove a point. If you're going to put us through this, we're going to do this specifically. If you're going to try and put us on blast, we're going to specifically try to get you. Because the reality in this Dabo situation is Ole Miss lost Chris Jones to Florida State through almost the exact same circumstance. He signed a contract, though. He signed a rev share deal with Ole Miss. Got offered more money with Florida State. He's gone. It's fine. Pete Golding didn't hold a press conference, didn't do anything crazy. He got tampered with. And once you look at what LSU did, I mean, that is off the charts. And not one person, not one of these NCAA sycophants who just want drama of what's going on said a single thing when that went on for like nearly a month. So excuse me when I just don't care what your opinion is, especially when there aren't really any punishment that is worth it to get upset about. And all it is just the opinions of people that are fans of other teams saying what should happen. I always tell my wife, you have to see the world as it is, not as the way you want it to be. You want to live in a world where there's no tampering and everything's going straight by the board, and all of this happens because of good, noble reasons. That's not the world we live in. We have to live in that world. We have to judge based off of that world. And if Ole Miss is the only school that ends up going down for something that literally everyone is doing, then Ole Miss is going to take other schools down with them. They're not going to go down they're not going to fall on the sword just for the heck of it. They're going to do that. They're going to be loud. They're going to break out lawyers. Remember, the Ole Miss lawyers are the people that brought down the tobacco industry. They're pretty good. They do a decent job. And they're going to find a way to make this hurt the most people possible, because they're not just going to sit idly by and be a punching bag, not going to be a pincushion, essentially. So we'll see what's going on there. All right, in our final segment, sources say this filing is not an indication that the waiver has or will be denied. It's simply a case of parallel roads right now. We'll talk about that right after the break. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, and the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Pulled up the Game Time app and picked an upcoming NBA game. They had tickets locked in within minutes. I loved seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Get last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Everything feels quick and intuitive, honestly, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Seriously. All right, this is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season finally comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it all with this special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you are backing a favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game that everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It is the perfect way to cap off a season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the football season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Super Bowl and Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. You know, one thing's interesting. Everybody's looking at what's going on in the lawsuit, and they're like, what about the waiver? And we talk about the shenanigans from the NCAA. And one thing about the NCAA that you need to realize moving forward is unpredictability. They have everything in front of them to see that they're going to lose this case. At the beginning, it's going to cost thousands of dollars to litigate what's going on. All of this can be avoided by just putting the waiver through. A case that you're going to lose, NCAA. Just put the waiver through for Trinidad Chambliss and he's good to go. All of this goes away. You can fight the kid that's played professional basketball and is now at Alabama. You can fight that one. That's much more of a winner than what you have right now. But they're not doing it to this point, but that doesn't mean they won't at a certain point. Yesterday's filing essentially put the NCAA in position. It's like, okay, it's another step. It's kind of another shot across the bow. Let's just go ahead and do this and get it done. So that is the reason that I think the waiver is not outside the realm of possibility. And when I talk to sources around the program, even with what is going on in Oxford right now, seriously, thoughts and prayers to everybody affected by the ice storm. The mayor of Corinth is without power, and one of the pipes busted in his house. And is having to stay at another location, like a shelter type thing, while this gets going. So everybody keep Tom in your thoughts as well. But the NCAA has the opportunity to kind of make this right and at least get this out of there to where we can move on to the next step of stuff that they brought up. And that would be the NCAA talking to Ole Miss about a tampering situation to where everything that is related to that, the smoking gun text especially, is likely gone. The NCAA does not have subpoena power. All they're going to say is, did you do this? And he's going to say no. Everybody's going to say, no, that didn't happen. They're going to go against everything that was said in this log that they put out to everybody, and they're going to say, no, it didn't happen. And they're going to say, what about the text message? Like, what text message? And they're going to show the phone and it's not there. And they're going to say, can we look at it? And it's like, sure, because I am absolutely positive they've done the equivalent of shredding all that stuff right now, even if it did exist. So I don't think anything comes of it. I do think Ole Miss is at the point to where they're kind of beyond the NCAA fabricating stuff to get a scalp of what's going on. But with the NCAA, they have a history of kicking Ole Miss fans in the balls. They just do. So you can't trust exactly what they say until it's finally over. Heck, even the Jeremiah Masoli thing, if everybody remembers that in 2010, he wasn't declared eligible until like 3 days before the first game. Just ridiculous stuff. Gerald Poe, multiple years of eligibility. There is a long honored history by the NCAA of kicking Ole Miss in the balls. And Ole Miss isn't going to let them this time. In my opinion, they're not going to let them. From everybody I've talked to, they're like, we're going to fight everything. There's going to be no exemplary cooperation like we saw in 2017. That's not going to be a thing. And any penalties that are given down to Ole Miss, I'm sure you're going to see them in court. They're just going to sue. They're going to be not necessarily hostile. They're going to play nice and they're going to do what they have to do. But they're going to be clear about this fact. We're not going down for something that everybody does. Period. You want to be mad about it? Fine. That's okay. If you want to call us ugly names, sure, whatever. But you are not going to give us penalties, because if that happens, we are going to put it in state court against and get an injunction against those penalties. It's just one of those things. They're from everybody I've talked to, they are willing to fight this time. They weren't willing to fight when Jeffrey Vitter was calling it. They weren't willing to fight when Gerald Turner was in charge of it. They're pretty willing to fight with Glenn Boyce in charge of it. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss and everybody else. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk transfer portal all week, so make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you get the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels, so check that out as well. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Ole Miss ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonolemmiss.supercast.com and join the club. For the all-access members, we are going to start breaking down the transfer portal position group by position group. That's Coach Corey Burton. That is Mike Huseman on there. You can tune in and see my after the show that is going to be live at about 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central, talking about this episode and kind of adding a little bit of color to what is going on. And we're going to call it After the Show. So tune in for that. And we'll see if and when Dalen gets power back, he's going to start putting videos up as well. So the all access feed's going to get to be pretty crowded as this continues. Anyway, hotty toddy, everybody. Thoughts and prayers to everybody affected by the ice storm, and we will talk to you later. Take care.